Now I see that we've gone live. Welcome everybody to the breakdown, and welcome to Adam Klasfeld from All Rise News. Thank you everybody for joining us. Hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. We would love to hear how many people from around the country are coming on to listen to this quick chat. We're going to have about a 15-20 minute chat. We're going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, you were at the Comey hearing this week about with Judge Curie, who was brought up from South Carolina to the Eastern District of Virginia because all the EDVA, Eastern District of Virginia judges recused themselves on hearing the lawfulness of the appointment of Lindsay Halligan in case they have to hear cases in front of her at a later date. So they brought up Cameron Curie. She was appointed by Bill Clinton. And she is the one deciding the lawfulness of Lindsay Halligan's appointment in both the Comey case and the Letitia James case, because those have kind of been consolidated into one case, because Lindsay Halligan is the only person who signed off on the indictments and was the only person to present to the grand jury in those cases. And then after we talk a little bit about that hearing and the potential upcoming hearing, the upcoming hearing this week in the Comey case on its motions hearing, after that, we're going to discuss the revival of two state cases for the fraudulent electors scheme, one in Nevada and in Fulton County, Georgia, where Fani Willis was disqualified from prosecuting that case until and unless a new prosecutor was appointed. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So everybody, welcome. And we really appreciate you being here. And we appreciate you supporting the breakdown and All Rise News. Adam Klasfeld, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Allison.
It's always a pleasure to see you. And thanks to the support of listeners and subscribers to All Rise News, you were able to be in the courtroom for this Comey Letitia James hearing over the lawfulness of the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. And one of the very first questions that the judge asked was about whether the defense, whether Comey's attorneys had received the declination memo from Eric Siebert, the previous prosecutor before Lindsay Halligan was installed. What was the feeling in the courtroom as far as because the reports I'm reading are that the Judge Curie was very skeptical of what the government was putting out.
Absolutely. She said at the end of the hearing, to fast forward a bit, that she would rule by Thanksgiving. And if I were James Comey, who was in the courtroom that day, I think he would be feeling very good about the upcoming holiday. The central question in my mind, now, you can never really tell based on questioning, and I'm not going to say this definitively that this case is getting thrown out, but it seemed very, very clear that she is deeply skeptical, in the words of every news organization that covered it, about the future of this case. Certainly skeptical about the lawfulness of Lindsay Halligan's appointment. And the central question is, what is she going to do about it? This is almost certainly going to follow in the footsteps of the Alina Habba case, the Bill Saley case, the Sigil Chadha case. All three of them were unlawfully appointed. But unlike in those cases, there's a very real chance that the indictment won't survive it, because here's the difference. She made clear in the middle of the hearing that Lindsay Halligan was the only person in the grand jury room. She also made clear, and just to take a step back here, before the hearing, one of the things that I was looking forward to learning is, what did she see in those grand jury records? That she had asked for the grand jury records. She didn't need to do that. None of the three other federal judges who had presided over the disqualification cases looked at the grand jury records. And we got insight as to why she asked for that, because there is a missing section at the end of it. Now, the reason I think she had the insight to ask for the grand jury materials was that Pam Bondi on Halloween, on October 31st, sent her order retroactively appointing, bending space and time to retroactively appoint Lindsay Halligan as a special attorney. And she said she made that decision quote, based on my observations, my review of the grand jury proceedings in the cases United States v. Comey and United States v. James. And the judge pointed out, she said, as I recall it, this is a paraphrase, it became obvious to me that she could not have reviewed the grand jury proceedings because there was no court reporter present as of 4:28 p.m. And by public reports, the indictment came back well into the 7 o'clock hour. And folks might be watching thinking, well, maybe they were just deliberating for all that time. These are grand juries. They don't need unanimity. Every former federal prosecutor I speak to says these are typically minutes long deliberations. There would be some sort of clarification on the record that we are back at such and such hour. I, Lindsay Halligan, affirm that no substantive conversations happened. There's nothing. There's just a dearth. So one of the key questions in my mind as I go ahead is, of course, what does the judge do about it? It seems like there is a much stronger chance of her throwing out the case against James Comey altogether, because this is in particular the grand jury transcript in that case. And so Pam Bondi's ratification that I reviewed it and it's all on the up and up can't hold water specifically in the James Comey case. But I have to say, she didn't give a tough reception to Letitia James's attorney, Abby Lowell, either. As a matter of fact, she seemed very receptive to Abby Lowell's arguments. So the key question is, if she finds Lindsay Halligan was unlawfully appointed, and 3-0 on that point right now from Alina Habba, Bilal Asali, and Sigal Chadha, 3 federal judges. Every time it's been challenged, it has gone for the defendants on the appointment issue. Is the remedy issue? What does she do about it? Does she dismiss the case, and does she dismiss the case with prejudice? And this one is different than those other 3 because now we have this very weird thing that happened in the grand jury transcripts, which she didn't get to investigate too closely. There was no exchange. Hey, why are 2 hours missing here? Because she's not investigating misconduct. She is questioning a narrow issue. Is Lindsay Halligan unlawfully appointed? And if so, what am I going to do about it? I being Judge Curry. And one final point on this kind of topic. I'm going to be back in Alexandria, Virginia next week for a hearing in the James Comey case. We'll see if the magistrate judge, who also requested the grand jury records, who does have it would be well within his rights to look into what happened. And we'll see if we get some clarification here. Lindsay Halligan was in court this past week. She could have passed a note to her assistant U.S. attorney, Henry Whitaker, and said, innocent explanation here, make it known to the judge. That didn't happen. We didn't get any explanation for that missing 2 hours. We'll see if the magistrate judge next week holds the government's feet to the fire on that issue, or whether it'll be a moot point because the case will be dismissed.
Yeah, and I believe that the Department of Justice argued against the magistrate Judge Fitzpatrick getting all of the grand jury material, and Judge Nachmanoff ruled that the judge has all of the right in the world to request that grand jury material. But with Judge Curry, that 2 hours and 20 minutes that's missing, 4:27 is when they stopped transcribing. 6:47, according to a Comey filing, is when the indictment was returned. And that is a huge problem. And I love that that the judge is like, look, if you want me to assess Pam Bondi's DeLorean time machine appointment of Lindsay Halligan, I need to verify that Pam Bondi did review all of the grand jury materials and made that determination based on her review of the grand jury materials. And from what you're telling me, Department of Justice, she can't have reviewed them all because there's 2.5 hours missing.
Right.
And I am interested to know, me, Allison Gill, I want to know, when was that no bill returned?
Right.
And at
Right.
what point in the deliberations was the court reporter dismissed? Was it a no bill and then they dismissed the court reporter to go home for the day and then Lindsay Halligan brought the grand jury back in and got the true bill?
Right.
And if we don't have any way to determine, first of all, you can't do any of that off the record without a court reporter there. But if we don't have any way to determine that, I feel like, the tie goes to the runner in this case. It goes to Comey and, in this particular case, Jim Comey, to say, look, I can't prove. It's up to you to prove to me that you appointed retroactively Lindsay Halligan based on your review of the grand jury material. And if that chunk is missing, first of all, why is it missing? I would like to see the court reporter brought in uh, and asked about what point during the deliberations were they asked to leave. Was it after the FBI guy testified and before Lindsay Halligan came back to deliver the end of the case? Was it after a no bill was returned, but before she went back to get a true bill? All of those things I'm very interested in. And maybe Judge Fitzpatrick will have time to get to the bottom of it before Judge Curie dismisses the whole shebang based on the unlawful appointment, which is why I'm like, maybe that's why she's waiting until Thanksgiving to
Right.
to get this, because we're all a little bit curious about what Lindsay Halligan said to that grand jury. Did she tell them, "I will keep you here until you give me a true bill"? Did she tell them, "I won't feed you until you give me a true bill"? Did she give them misinformation? Did she fail to show them the inspector general report that kind of exonerates the whole situation here? Did she fail to discuss Braunston litigation and literal truth factors? Did she? She's never done this before,
Yeah.
and so it's very important, I think, for both of these judges to review that grand jury material. And the fact that after asking for it 3 times, Judge Curie still hasn't been able to get the full grand jury transcripts, or Fitzpatrick, because they asked for it and they just gave the FBI guy's testimony. And Judge Fitzpatrick's like, how about the rest? And, then
Right.
they hand over this thing with a chunk of time missing. So it's all very, very sus, as they
Right.
say.
And to your point, Allison, I mean, one of the things that the magistrate is going to suss out is whether to give what exists of the grand jury material to Comey's defense. And that caused a lot of the appeal that you had mentioned, which Judge Nachmanov brought back down, saying that's absolutely within the discretion of the judge if it's warranted. So we'll see if that comes to a head this Wednesday. But this week was the first revelation of this missing gap in this very critical period of time. I mean, folks need to remember the 2 counts that came in by a razor thin margin. It's actually quite stunning that they no billed any count, let alone what was going to be the top count of this indictment at all. And that the the 2 counts that barely made it over the finish line had it with the authority of someone presenting herself with the weight and majesty of the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, a title that she might not have. And that was a point that was made during the arguments that Comey's lawyer, McDowell, he made the point to say, if she introduced herself as a special attorney, would that have defeated that margin? The fact that we don't know what she said to them in that missing 2.5 hours before they deliberated. What happened? It's entirely a black box. We did not get any kind of fact gathering about it because the focus of Judge Curry was very narrow. It was on the topic of disqualification, and her interest in it was, you, Pam Bondi, told me you reviewed it. You made sure it was on the up and up. You could not possibly have done that. It became obvious to me because you don't know what happened in these final hours. We'll see if there's some fact gathering next week on this. How did this happen? Are we going to find out more information, have some sort of discovery from the vantage point of the court reporter? I'm going to be very interested to find out what happens on that front.
Yeah, and then we also had a kind of a fun moment when the 3 statutes that Pam Bondi purportedly retroactively used to appoint Lindsay Halligan, a special attorney, were the three statutes that allowed Merrick Garland to appoint Jack Smith as a special prosecutor against Donald Trump, and actually got the DOJ to admit in court that they disagreed with Eileen Cannon's dismissal of Jack Smith as his lawful appointment of the of
And it
that's
was
just fantastic.
incredible. Yeah, it was incredible the way that Judge Curry entered the shiv on that question. I mean, the question, I believe verbatim, because it was just such a stunning moment, it's in my memory, is, was United States v. Trump wrongly decided? And, putting the assistant U.S. attorney, Henry Whitaker, on the spot. Are you a representative of the Trump DOJ going to tell me right now that Judge Cannon was wrong, that Jack Smith, in fact, was perfectly appointed under our laws and traditions and practices as a special prosecutor, and therefore the case should not have been dismissed? And it was a really long, circuitous journey for Whitaker to actually say that the DOJ comes on the other side of that question. His original dancing around of the question was, well, we don't think it's controlling, Your Honor. He was we brought a great guest into the chat right here. Um, but, I will say that he originally tried to dance around that question, and he said it's not controlling. That's the Southern District of Florida. And this, of course, is the Eastern District of Virginia.
Yeah, we disagree with that because it's devastating to our case.
Right.
So yeah, and when she asked, did they decide it wrong under the laws of our country? The laws that she's talking about are the same laws that Pam Bondi is using to retroactively appoint Lindsay Halligan. So
Right.
very fun, very fascinating. Let's talk just briefly about and of course Abby Lowell saying, her being in that grand jury room, Lindsay Halligan, is no different than Elon Musk or Steve Bannon returning an indictment, only to have the Attorney General bless them as U.S. attorneys later.
Right.
Um, let's talk about the revival of a couple of state cases. Our Department of Justice Wackadagpa is what I call him. He's the Weaponization Czar Associate Deputy Attorney General Pardon Attorney, a man named Mr. Ed Martin. He he released a list of a huge pardon for anybody who participated in the fraudulent elector scheme trying to overturn the 2020 election. Granted, that was a performative pardon because none of them had ever been charged federally, and you can't pardon state crimes. But I think that was more of a bat signal to future uh, election criminals saying, "No MAGA left behind. We got your back. If you break the law trying to steal the election for Donald Trump, we got you." I think that's what that was about. But keep talking about the state cases. Just within the last couple of days, day or two, last 24 hours, I think, the Nevada state case, which was a case that was only brought over the 6 fraudulent electors in Nevada. It didn't include any of the architects like the Fulton County case did. It didn't include Sidney Powell or John Eastman or Boris Epstein or any of those folks. It was just the 6 electors. Had been stuck. It had been frozen because there was a venue challenge. The Republicans and the electors were saying it shouldn't have been brought in Clark County, but the Nevada Supreme Court said, yes, it was brought properly in the right county. So now that case is back from the dead. And then we have Fulton County, which Fani Willis was disqualified from prosecuting. And then it's up to a Georgia state group of lawyers, the something Professional Prosecutors Council or something, who is headed up by a guy named Scandalakis, which is a fun name to say. And I know that name because, and many of you watching, and you, Adam, know this name because early on in the Fulton County prosecution, one of the fraudulent electors, also a state senator named Burt Jones, was being prosecuted. And they said that Fani Willis was disqualified from prosecuting him because she hosted a political fundraiser for his Senate opponent. And so she was disqualified from the case. And in Georgia, my understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this counsel, this prosecutor's counsel, then tries to assign it to a different prosecutor, maybe somebody in Cobb County or Coffee County or somebody else. And what happened with the Burt Jones case is at the very last minute, at the deadline to appoint someone on the Burt Jones case, Skandalakis said, "I can't find anybody. I'll do it myself." And then he quickly tanked the case. He submarined it. And so that's what has happened here. He hasn't submarined it yet, but Skandalakis waited to the last possible moment when he had to assign a prosecutor to take over for Fani Willis on the fraudulent electors 2020 case, and that's one includes Rudy Giuliani and all the rest. But Skandalakis, I had even I think tweeted or blue skied you and Anna Bowers like, I wonder if Skandalakis is going to take it for himself again. And bam, we learned today he has. So, what are your thoughts on the revival of these two cases?
I'm going to offer the glass half full perspective on this because we're talking about two revived cases for now. We'll see what happens with the case in Georgia. There's also, I'm going to throw into the mix, a federal civil case that the KKK Act case against the Trump campaign, against Trump himself, and against a bunch of Trump Confederates in Washington, D.C. And right now, the significance, the fact that this is now going to be playing out in at least 3 jurisdictions and then perhaps maybe 2, we'll see how many of them ultimately survive, is we're now at a moment where you have pretty much most of Senate GOP and House GOP leadership trying to create an alternate history of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, where the misconduct is mostly coming from authorized subpoenas of the people who Trump and Giuliani called in order to subvert a free and fair election. There's an alternate history being written, and I think that the importance and significance of this is that the true history is going to be playing out in courtrooms across the country. In the civil case against Trump, in the case about the false electors, I think there's probably not a very complete understanding about, for example, why Trump's top count in his election subversion case was conspiracy to defraud the United States, because fraud was central to the attack on the election, to the attempt to overturn a free and fair election. People were submitting fraudulent documents into courts, into legislatures with sworn statements. That's why the Nevada case, even though it wasn't a key swing state, even though it doesn't involve the central list of characters, I bet that the discovery will, I bet that the evidence will. And it keeps the counter programming to the attempt to rewrite the history of January 6th, the attempt to rewrite the history of the 2020 election. It puts the actual history front and center again in 3 different locations. So we'll see what Skandalakis does with the Georgia case. And we do have that history with Burt Jones, that case ultimately getting spiked in Georgia. But for the time being, we have the revival of that case in Nevada and the case in Washington, D.C., the civil case with potentially broader discovery. It won't be confined to prosecutors trying to fit within the narrow confines of this. That other evidence could come out, because at the heart of that case is it survived dismissal on the grounds that that it passed the Brandenburg test of incitement. We can get to the question of incitement. So all of these cases are very significant to me, which is why I take the glass half full. There's an active effort to rewrite this history, and the courts are providing the counter narrative with the actual facts.
Yeah, and there's a congressman named Levine who is actually working on a plan to develop curriculum for states, for schools, on teaching the proper truth and history of what happened on January 26th. I hope we see that state by state. There's also an active lawsuit filed by Harry Dunn to get the January 6th plaque hung in the halls of Congress. It was a law that was passed and signed in 2023 or in 2022, and it was supposed to be hung in 2023 by law. And Mike Johnson has refused to hang that plaque. So they're suing, saying, "Hey, either hang the plaque or tell us why you're not hanging the plaque." Like,
Right.
let's fish or cut bait. So a lot going on with that, and I also just wanted to bring up the talking about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss for a moment. Their civil case will not be impacted by these Ed Martin, Donald Trump pardons, because you can't pardon a civil action,
Right.
as you were alluding to.
Yeah.
So
Or a state action. So
yep. Yep. So, as always, All Rise News will be watching all of these cases very closely. Adam, you're traveling to the Eastern District of Virginia to sit in on this motions hearing for Comey. It's supposed to be what, November 19th this week?
yes, it's Wednesday. So
Yeah, he's
we're
also trying to move up his December 9th hearing to December 3rd, 4th, or 5th because they have a trial conflict with Comey's attorneys. But man, they aren't joking when they call the Eastern District of Virginia the rocket docket, because they are moving incredibly quickly, and I'm glad for that.
It's funny. For the first time, it was when I saw the Comey hearing this past week. It was my first time in the Eastern District of Virginia, and the reputation of the rocket docket. You walk into the courthouse, and there's a sign with, of course, the famous expression, "Justice delayed is justice denied." And there's this sort of mural slash statue rendering of the tortoise and the hare, and you have these rabbits jumping from one position of the mural to the other, and a turtle neck out, and it's like, oh, we are walking into the rocket docket, because everyone on this chat knows how long Trump's criminal cases were progressing. If Comey's case survives, I will be there again in January. That's how quickly this is processing. It's going to happen very quickly in the James case, if that makes it to trial. So, yes, it is a rocket docket, and it bears the signature of the rocket docket, even in the facade of the courthouse.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, my friend, for coming on and explaining some of these things to us, talking about the nuances, talking about um, giving us a little courtroom color when it comes to how Judge Curie was feeling, and expressing her skepticism with this particular Department of Justice, which is not a surprise given all of the judges who have commented in the last 8 or 9 months that the presumption of regularity has been decimated by this particular Department of Justice. I am holding out hope that they don't outrightly dismiss these cases until we find out more about the malfeasance in the grand jury. But we'll see what happens, and you can follow All Rise News for all of it. And if you do have the means and you're able to subscribe and support Adam Klasfeld's work, please do. It helps him pay for his travel. He doesn't have a corporate overlord telling him what he can and can't say, and also not helping him pay for his travel. So any financial support you could give him by subscribing as a paid subscriber to his Substack at All Rise News goes a really long way to helping out and getting the information to you in the best and most honest manner, most transparent manner. So thank you, my friend, for spending a little bit of time with us today.
Thank you, my friend. Always great chatting, Allison.
Everybody, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time here at The Breakdown.